critical reason why fake news is shared is basically this our ideology. Who do we align to? What is our political ideology or groups that we are part of?
These days, the ones who produce misinformation have also learned they're 2 steps ahead now.
What's actually even naughty, as in KNOTTY, not naughty, is understanding the intricate process of human psychology and human decision making.
6 months back, if someone would have asked me, what about deepfake? And many researchers do ask us, and we would joke around saying, in India there's no deepfake, there's something called as cheap fake,
We have been all bombarded with all kinds of news. Our social landscape has seen all kinds of fake news and misinformation with some palpable consequences, So it has an effect on democratic elections, not only in the US, but other places in the world as well. It has seen effect on, in India, there are a lot of harmful consequences of fake news. And, this was a survey which was done by just 2 weeks ago. This report came out from UN, where they surveyed all over the world. And they found that 85% of the people actually worry about online disinformation. It is something which is on top of their mind. And this report suggests that there are 7 democratic elections that are going to happen in the next year in big countries, including India, US, and so forth. And all of those are susceptible to misinformation. There's one critical reason why fake news is shared is basically this our ideology. Who do we align to? What is our political ideology or groups that we are part of? And if a news comes which makes our group feels great, makes our groups feel better, we tend to believe that. We tend to share that news. It's this idea called motivated reasoning. We are motivated to believe the things that we want to happen, even if they are not true. And within that context, academia has found a lot of fake news that is shared was shared by people who endorse this conservative political ideology. And this is the finding that I kind of tackled on this question. Not all conservatives tend to share fake news. So who are those conservatives that tend to share more misinformation or fake news? And we dealt on this idea of, this big 5 personality traits. Individuals have broad personalities, and we looked at conscientiousness as one trait. And why conscientiousness is because among all these 5 traits, conscientiousness is one trait which seems to have the most predictive power of, how it will affect our actions, So, and why is that? Because consciousness is about individuals who tend to be orderly, who tend to control their impulses, who tend to follow prescribed social norms, they tend to delay gratification. These are the individuals who tend to be reliable, trustworthy, and so forth, So people, even though if they have a certain kind of political ideology, in this case being conservative, as long as they are high on conscientiousness, they would tend to share less fake news. Now, broadly, what are the implications of this work? One is people tend to share fake news genuinely by a desire to harm others. That is one set of studies that we found. But then there are others, who are not low consciousness conservatives. They do for more benign reasons, which is for social needs, to avoid exclusion. And both of these reasons kind of drive proliferation of fake news on social media. All in all, to say, there's a trust deficit in and around. Even the mainstream channels, news people, we don't trust. It's hard for us to figure out who to trust and how do we trust. So thank you for being here, and I'm very excited to have you here. So let me just first ask each of you, the kind of work you do. So I know you all take different strategies to tackle misinformation.
I'll start with a couple of examples. So how many of you celebrated the World Students' Day this year?
Children's Day.
World Students' Day.
Student Day.
It was on October 15th. No, you didn't? Okay. So this is a very unique example of how, this particular piece of information has fooled everybody. So it started in 2010. A random blog on the internet said Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam's birthday, which happens to be October 15th, was declared by the UN. It's the World Students. Now it was picked up by mainstream media over the years, not 1 year. So you search on the internet every year, mainstream media writes about, how the UN has declared in 2010 and so on and so forth. The story doesn't end there. The irony of this is union ministers, the vice president of India, MPs often quote in their official speeches, their official press releases which say the UN has declared, this October 15th. Now it might look very benign, harmless piece of misinformation, but you need to understand all that Hemant was talking about in his research captured in this one piece of misinformation. Now, what started? The blog had financial motivations. They just wanted to do something very sensational. what started was then some of them picking it up because of FOMO, fear of missing out. Everybody's writing, let me write about it. Then the others thought, this is pride, pride in Dr. Abdul Kalam being our president, being such a great individual, and so on and so forth. So if you see, even if you go on the internet, and it has gone to such an extent that even today, if you look at all the Gen AI platforms, I think Bard does give you a nuanced answer, but ChatGPT, for instance, even their latest GPT-4 Turbo, still tells you that it is October 15 and you even set it. Now, if you see the cycle, what is happening is, so somebody started, there is information on the net, because these LLMs are trained on that information. So we're just seeing that recycled information again and again. Just because the technology has evolved does not mean that we'll suddenly have an information ecosystem which is very clean. So I wanted to start with that example because it captures one on the research side, because everybody is doing for a different reason. At the same time, during elections, what we see is also very, I would say, I wouldn't say sophisticated, but rather there is a tendency for all of us to believe when somebody quotes a number. And these days, the ones who produce misinformation have also learned they're 2 steps ahead now. So they always add a source. So 3 years, 4 years ago, when we were in training sessions, we would tell you the first thing that you should look at when you look at any messages, check if there is a source. Now we don't tell that because every message has a source. You can add a random source and say, it was said in 1940, 1950, 1960. So what is happening is there are sophistications, there are improvements every day. Of course, technology can't solve every problem, but with whatever little we have, we're trying to see how the advancement in technology can help solve this problem.
Well, thank you. Archna?
So I had actually made some points that I'd like to share with you. One is the fact that interconnectedness through internet and mobile is actually generating scale and speed of misinformation that is quite formidable. In a country like India, which is so diverse in terms of cultural, linguistics, as well as social, economic diversity, this becomes even more intense. What's actually even naughty, as in KNOTTY, not naughty, is understanding the intricate process of human psychology and human decision making. Also, the fact that we have our own belief systems, which Hemant did speak about, and the influences that actually shape our perceptions as well as actions. This is super fundamental because this information is actually working with humans. And as far as the fabricators, whether they are passive or they're active, they understand that much better than we do. We try and correct for misinformation. When it comes to misinformation, we truly believe that it's not a top-down approach. And the fact that working with communities, giving them the empowerment skills as well as the tools and resources so that they can decide for themselves, they can identify misinformation themselves, is more sustainable, and that's what we strive for.
Perfect. Thank you. Next, Jency.
Thank you. First of all, quite a privilege to be a part of this panel as also the first ISB Insights Forum. Hemant, you showed some excellent results from your research. And I told you yesterday that we are also doing some form of research, though we can't match your prowess as far as research is concerned. So we're looking at Israel-Hamas conflict. And over the now this has been like less than 2 months. And what we've seen is that we did about 92 stories around this time, 92 fact checks. And there are a couple of inputs that I would like to share here, what we found, though we are still waiting to distill it in a much more better fashion. So on these 92 fact checks, what we found is that over 90% of the misinformation and disinformation you have seen during this period are sensationalist in nature. So that's one of the first insights. Then second is that 11% of these 92 fact checks we have done, they are false claims related to Palestinians faking deaths. So you'll see a lot of claims showing some child with blood on the face or someone crying over a dead relative. And there are claims that have gone around on social media where they've said that Palestinians are faking deaths. So 11% of the claims that we've looked at are regarding this. 90% of the misinformation we've seen have been peddled via videos. And more than 3/4 of the claims are old videos that are unrelated or misattributed in the current context. So you might see some of the videos that are going viral have nothing to do with the present conflict. Then, now the next point, I want to be a bit careful saying it here, though I know a lot of emotions will be evoked based on what side of the divide you're on. But we found the main target of misinformation has been Hamas and followed by Palestinians. Now, this could also be because a lot of the Indians have a natural inclination towards Israel, and particularly if you belong to a certain ideology in the country, you do identify with Israel more closely than the Palestinians. So that's why probably in many of our stories we found that kind of a correlation. And additionally, Middle Eastern countries such as Syria, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, they have also been targets of this kind of misinformation. And so this is broadly what I wanted to point out, that whenever there is a current context or a current conflict that is in the news, we will find that a lot of the claims that are going around are either videos or they are trying to put down a certain community over the other. So that's been the broad understanding that we have seen. As Rakesh said, now even the basic checks have been polluted because you cannot tell anyone, please look at the source, because the source itself may be polluted. So 6 months back, if someone would have asked me, oh, what about deepfake? And many researchers do ask us, and we would joke around saying, oh, in India there's no deepfake, there's something called as cheap fake, So we say there's nothing called as deepfake in India, there's cheap fake. We no longer say that, because already in these 5 state elections, we have seen some videos where we are very close to feeling that that there are some tools being utilized.
Have you figured out as an organization, and I'll bring this question back to Rakesh as well, to how to overcome some of the challenges of deepfake? How can we figure out this is really a deepfake?
As far as deepfake technology is concerned and cloned audio is concerned, this will require tools. And our biggest challenge today, and that's the kind of work that Rakesh is also trying to do, and I hope that he succeeds in doing it. Technology will actually bring in a lot of understanding. Like yesterday, we did a story where we didn't have the technology to do that. We sent it to someone, and that person put the audio into the file, into their tool, and they said that 85 to 90% we can see that this is a cloned audio. We need that kind of intervention. And till the time that kind of intervention doesn't come, it's going to be very difficult for us as fact-checking newsroom. Yes, there are other ways to do it, but we want to scale our work in terms of trying to give a response faster. And as we go ahead into elections, this is going to be a major headache for us in the coming elections.
I think it has to be a combination of tools. There is no one answer to, there is no silver bullet. So we have to follow multiple strategies. Like you were saying, start young. Education is obviously the first thing. But at the same time, specific technology, I would say 2 things. One is tools that can identify, and I'm sure in the coming months and years we'll see them. And 2, use existing, what is existing to at least ensure we pre-bunk certain.
Archna, coming back to you, we're talking about AI, but the kind of world, the landscape you deal in is, even some of them don't even have access to smartphone, so talking about rural areas and villages, and especially women. Some of them may not even have a regular phone, but they still have this misinformation, and you're still dealing with some of those. So what are the challenges you see? Where are they getting their misinformation from, and how do you, what kind of community initiative you take to overcome some of those things?
With so much of the AI and the content that's being generated, an organization like ours, we have to really face up our own ways of working and dealing with this entire technology, and I guess we need to upskill ourselves really quickly. So I think that's a major challenge for us. But coming to communities who do not have access to information, I think it is going back to the basics where you still work with where the channels are not available, you tend to work with hyper-local strategies, right? Local influences matter a lot. We saw all of that, basic principles being used for COVID. But I think one thing that's stood out during COVID is just the role of panchayats and panchayat leaders. Mm-hmm. And that even the government saw for itself in terms of, oh my God, the role of panchayat leaders is so much more in terms of what they can do to community. So I think it is going back to who are the trusted source of information. It could be a healthcare worker, ASHA worker, it could be the panchayat leader, it could be a community member. And over that, you overlay, again, behavioral science in terms of people tend to, believe who they trust around them. And we use a lot of community-based strategies to make sure that communities have the right kind of information.